everyone, and welcome back to the So Rude podcast. My name is Paige Ruderman, and I hope you're having a great day. So, you want to be a podcast guest? That's why you're tuning into this episode. Well, I think I can help you out. As someone that has been hosting a podcast for 4 years, I've had over 100 episodes. I've had tens of guests through my own feedback, through me watching other people's podcasts, and being a fan of content. I have created a list of some things that you should consider if you want to be a podcast guest. It's going to help you be the best guest you possibly can be because you're going to show up prepared and you're going to help impress the people that you're working with and hopefully best connect with the audience of the podcast that you are going to be a guest of. So, to kick things off, my number one recommendation is you should rehearse the answers to commonly asked questions. It's without fail. People are typically going to ask you, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? When did you get into music? What inspired you to get into music? Or whatever industry it is that you're working on. It doesn't just have to be music. You could just be listening to this episode because eventually you'd like to be a podcast guest in general. But I do think a lot of people tuning in are probably from the artistic, musical, creative side. So, a lot of questions you're going to get asked wherever you go. And if you can have your kind of standard elevator pitch ready to go, then your answers are going to come off more natural. They're going to come off more smooth. It's not going to seem like you're a deer caught in headlights. You're just going to kind of roll off your tongue. How can you rehearse that? I would first start out by writing it out. What is it you want to say? What are the points you want to hit on? And make sure you have it all documented, written out. After that, you're going to practice saying it out loud, not just in your head. I can read something just fine on the page, but when I go to speak it, it's different. Did I have the right syllables ready to go? Was my tongue in the right place to pronounce the word in the correct way? That's only going to come through practice. So, the same way you're going to sit there and you're going to play your instrument and you're going to go over scales and you're going to sing your songs and you're going to practice your vocal warm ups, you're going to practice talking about yourself. And trust me, it's not that awkward. Some of my favorite ways to do this are in the shower or when I'm folding laundry or I'm cooking dinner. I'm just naturally doing something, and it's a great way to kind of be multi productive and you just talk it through. Recently, my sister was visiting me and she's like, do you always talk to yourself out loud? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I talk to myself out loud quite a bit, but it allows me to then share and speak in a way that feels most natural because it's not out of the blue. I've been doing this over and over and over again. I'd like to expand on this recommendation because trust me, of all the tips I'm going to say, if you can just get this one down, you're going to be light years ahead of other guests on podcasts that you are going to hopefully get to come on and be a guest of. The other thing I want to say about rehearsing your answers is you don't just want to say it as fast as you possibly can and then stop because then there's nothing to kind of go off of. How is the podcast host then going to interact with you? You kind of have to give them something to talk about, right? Like you're there to talk about you. Give them something to talk about. Yes, it is important that the podcast host does their research and has their questions. But when they're asking you questions and you're just like, yep, nope, sure. Okay, where do you go from there? Right. But if you're like, yeah, I agree with that statement because of this, or it's funny you asked me that question because before when I was da 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 years old and now you're into a story, right? Which kind of leads me into number two. You need to think of creative stories that you want to share and how you're going to bring them up naturally. If you find that sometimes people don't always exactly directly respond to the question that they're asked, but they respond in a way that allows them to share the information that they want to share. So if you have a really creative story about how Jimmy Joe down the street had a busted guitar that only had two strings on it, and you learned to play on those two strings, and that's why you always play in open tunings now. Like, you just have something like that ready to go. And then when someone says, oh, did you always know how to play guitar? Now you can go right into it. Or when did you start learning an instrument? You have that story ready to go. I would recommend having a few of those up your sleeve just as talking points. And hey, if you don't know how to bring them up in a conversation, tell the podcast host ahead of time, hey, like I'd love to hit at this at some point if you could T-ball me a question. That way I can knock it out of the park. Number three, I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's really helpful when you have something to promote. Even if it's not new, You can have something to point people to. I think new projects are the most exciting because it's like, oh, this song just came out, this single, this music video, whatever it is, this special, you're going on tour, you're launching your tour date soon, like just something. And if it's not new, again, you can still create hype around something. You could say, hey, it's the 1 year anniversary of my first EP, or it's the 6 month mark after I just finished this tour. And like, you won't believe the stories that I've had. Find a way to romanticize it. This really could just be me, but romanticize everything. It gets people excited. It gets people energized and interested and curious. That's what you want to be as a podcast guest. You want to have something to say that's interesting for the people listening to the show. Number 4, be easy to talk to. I know this is easier said than done. Some people are more extroverted, some people are more introverted. But if you're going on a podcast episode, whether it's audio only or audio and video, your inflections, the way you talk, the way people perceive you through your spoken words, that is what's quote unquote selling in the episode. And so if you are not someone that maybe is well spoken or feels most comfortable talking to people, if you can't get over that through the practice, which I think that probably will help you feel more comfortable, then maybe podcast isn't the best format for you. Maybe you want to go and have interviews or PR done that's in a written format. So that way you can percolate all of your ideas, get them organized and orchestrated, and then roll it out. Because that's going to be a way that you're going to show up in the best light. Just remember, content, social media, it's all about how do you look your best to the fans that you're hoping to connect with. So don't force yourself into something that's not going to connect with you. If you're not quick on your feet, if you're not someone that thrives in having a back and forth engaged conversation, then maybe there's another way that you're going to be able to showcase your materials to people you want to meet. Now, before you come at me, because I know a lot of people say this, like it's so exhausting making content as a creative. I do think so. But this is just another perspective on that. There used to be gatekeepers at record labels, at publishers, that if you didn't have an in, you had nothing. We live in a world where the gatekeepers today are your fans. They are the people you hope to connect with. So, in a way, you've cut out the middleman, but you still need to connect to an audience. That's what all those famous rock stars, musicians, artists, songwriters did before. They still had to connect with people. It just was through the format of being pre vetted ahead of time. The pre vetting is out, the vetting is happening online right now. And it's almost like the perfect opportunity for you to roll your shot. You're either going to do it or you're not. And I know that sounds really harsh. And trust me, there's times that I wish it wasn't like that, but there's nobody in your way. So if there's nobody in your way and it is just up to you connecting with the fans and connecting with your audience, why wouldn't you at least go for it? Sure. Does that mean you're going to have to create a few extra videos and the like? Yeah. But trust me, people back in the day were still doing interviews. They were going on Leno and, all the nighttime promotions and the Good Morning Americas and the radio station tours. They were still doing that before. Now you get to do that in a completely online format where nobody's going to get to tell you no, and you can sell yourself to the best of your abilities. So I would truly look at it from an optimistic place. With that said, this kind of leads us into number 5, which is calling out people and sharing the limelight. You have a perfect opportunity to talk about your art in a way that's not gate kept to the level it was before than any generation before us. The things that always resonate the most with me when I'm listening to a program or the people that like to listen to my show is when the guests that I bring on talk about the people that they work with. It takes a village. So when you can shout out, these are my collaborators, these are the people I work with a lot. I loved learning from this person. This person was a mentor to me. I learned a bunch when I was working with so and so. That type of nod to other people that you're collaborating with, it goes a long way. And this kind of extends. I was going to do a whole episode about this. So maybe you guys can let me know if this would be interesting to you. But like it kind of goes into the live writers round as well. When someone invites you to a writers round, it's important for you to kind of tip your hat at that person and acknowledge, like, hey, thank you so much for having me on the show. recognizing that you probably would not have been there, at least at that point in time, if it wasn't for the person making the connection. So you should thank that person for bringing you on. Play a song if you guys have written songs together, if you can. It's just that camaraderie. You are pouring back into the community that poured back into you. That goes a long way when you're connecting with your fans. I'm not saying you need to like fake it, but you should hopefully at least be grateful for the people that you get to work with and you want to talk about them in a positive light. And what better way to hype up the people that you work with and help connect with an audience than by showcasing, like, hey, there's a whole village working with me here, and I'm so proud to be a part of that village. This is a tip that is strictly for the other podcast hosts out there, and you're going to thank me when I say it, which is you should have promo photos ready to go. No matter who you're going on a show for, no matter if it's a blog, a podcast, a video, the radio station, they're going to ask you for your pictures because they're going to want to use it in some of their promotional material, a flyer, social media posts on the website for the blog article. You should have 3 to 5 promo pictures ready to go that are updated with your look and your brand. Like, don't use something from 15 years ago. You don't look like that anymore. Use something up to date and realistic. So that way it's ready to go. And you know what? You would even impress them if when you're coordinating and scheduling all that, you slip them into your email and say, by the way, here are some promo photos of me for you to have when you're ready. Let me know if you need anything else, but in case you need them for any promotional material. Oh my God, lifesaver, right? You already know that they're going to ask for it, just like you already know there's going to be questions that they're going to ask that you've prepared your answers to. Make sure you send the pictures ahead of time, or at least make sure you communicate with them about sharing them when it is the most helpful for them. So this is going to be a little bit out of the box as one of my final tips for so you want to be a podcast guest. I recommend posting online. And what I mean by that is I think you should share information about yourself online, do personal videos, post stories, post pictures, post blog articles, keep everything that you're a guest of easily referenceable. So whether that's a link tree in your bio or on your website, because a good podcast host is going to do their due diligence. They're going to look at what other material have you done? Where have you been a guest before? What have your answers been? So that way they know they're not just repeating and regurgitating the same information everybody else has done. However, they won't know what you've done unless it's kind of conjugated in one place. So, can you help people out that are going to be bringing you on as a guest? Maybe it's a media kit where you have all that stuff, information ready to go. But the more you can make it accessible, so that way future podcasts can see what you've done before, what have your answers been, so that way they can either expand upon those questions or know to ask other questions. It's just going to help the interview be as smooth and new for your fans as possible. So I got that tip from Sean Evans. Again, I'm a fan of content. I'm a fan of watching other interviewers. I think he's one of the best interviewers of our day. And he said an interview when they were asking him, how do you come up with the best interview questions? He's like, I read everything there is to know about a guest. So that way I know what to ask them. So between you sharing stories that are easy to understand because you've gone through them before in your mind, making sure you're elaborating and including information, and you're making that accessible to people to find, and you have your pictures ready to go, point blank period, you're already off to a much better start than other people that are hopefully going to get some PR, especially in the world of independent, right? Every podcast you want to go on or blog or show that you want to stop on that isn't being run by a major conglomerate, these people are entrepreneurs. They're doing it all themselves. They're wearing a lot of hats. So the easier you can make it for them, the better it's going to go and the more seamless it's going to go. My last tip is that you should have at least checked out the show that you're asking to be a guest on. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me wanting to be a guest on the show. They've never listened to the show. They didn't even read the show description. And I'm like, bro, this is a music podcast. Like, we're not talking about ageism in the workplace. Not that that's not an important topic, but like, that's not what the point of this show is about. So if you're just blind reaching out to people, one, anyone that accepts a blind reach out doesn't have a niche, which means that the people listening to that show might not be fans of what you're doing, which means realistically, there's a chance that those efforts are in vain because you're not going to connect with the right people. People aren't going to stumble upon it because they're not already engaged with that creator for the lane that you're trying to go down. And two, people that have a good show and know their audience and recognize that either you have never watched the show or listened to the show, or you have no idea what they do, are not going to respond, and you're not going to become a guest on there. And you've kind of shot yourself in the foot when it comes to hopefully going on that show in the future. Because that person's going to remember, like, I remember when this person reached out, they had never watched the show, they don't know anything about it. So just do your due diligence. Yes, you want to have a far reach as far as when you're trying to do PR for yourself and you're trying to get on as many shows as possible. Yes, I applaud people that are being proactive about getting on shows, but make sure it's like for the right reasons and that you know what show you're trying to go on and you know how that person is going to help you reach an audience. Because for me as a podcast host, I know what type of environment I've cultivated for the people listening to the show. So if I was to bring on someone out of left field, it's going to be really jarring for my audience. They might think to themselves, well, is this the lane that Paige is going down now? I don't know if this really interests me anymore. So, right, you got to keep all those things in mind. Everyone is trying to cultivate a space that feels the most comfortable for the lane that they're going down. Make sure you find the right couch for you to sit on. So I really hope that helps. Those are just a few tips and tricks I have about being a really good podcast guest. It's going to help you show up in the best light. I think you will find better success for wanting to find those PR opportunities for yourself, especially as an independent. But if you're working with a team and they don't seem to be helping you find opportunities for yourselves, maybe send them this episode and be like, hey, are you keeping these things in mind when you're setting up these interviews for me? If you're not already, make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at sorude.podcast, SORUDE period podcast. We are also on YouTube now, hence the video. So you can find us at So Rude Podcast. If you just search that on the YouTube platform, you will find us. We got shorts on there, we got the video on there. I think you'll love some of the previous episodes that are already ready to go for you to go back, binge, and enjoy. So, as always, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll chat again soon. Bye now.